superior being. What then is this soul? Something which has a lustre that is due to no quality other than its own. Could anything be more stupid than to praise a person for something that is not his, or more crazy than admiring things which, in a single moment, can be transferred to another? It is not a golden bit that makes one horse superior to others. Sending a lion into the arena with his mane gilded, tired by the handling he has been given in the process of being forced to submit to this embellishment, is a very different thing from sending in a wild one with his spirit unbroken, bold in attack, as nature meant him to be, in all his unkempt beauty, a beast whose glory it is that none can look on him without fear. He stands higher in people's eyes than the other, docile, gold-leaf-coated creature. No one should feel pride in anything that is not his own. We praise a vine if it loads its branches with fruit and bends its very props to the ground with the weight it carries. Would anyone prefer the famous vine that had gold grapes and leaves hanging on it? Fruitfulness is the vine's peculiar virtue. So too, in a man, praise is due only to what is his very own. Suppose he has a beautiful home and a handsome collection of servants, a lot of land under cultivation, and a lot of money out at interest. Not one of these things can be said to be in him. They are just things around him. Praise in him what can neither be given nor snatched away, what is peculiarly a man's. You ask what that is. It is his spirit, and the perfection of his reason in that spirit. For man is a rational animal. Man's ideal state is realized when he has fulfilled the purpose for which he was born. And what is it that reason demands of him? Something very easy, that he live in accordance with his own nature. Yet this is turned into something difficult by the madness that is universal among men. We push one another into vices. And how can people be called back to spiritual well-being when no one is trying to hold them back and the crowd is urging them on? Letter number 46. The book you promised me has come. I was intending to read it at my convenience, and I opened it on arrival without meaning to do any more than just get an idea of its contents. The next thing I knew, the book itself had charmed me into a deeper reading of it, there and then. How lucid its style is, you may gather from the fact that I found the work light reading, although at first glance might well convey the impression that the writer was someone like Livy or Epicurus, its bulk being rather unlike you or me. It was so enjoyable, though, that I found myself held and drawn on until I ended up having read it right through to the end without a break. All the time the sunshine was inviting me out, hunger prompting me to eat, the weather threatening to break, but I gulped it all down in one sitting. It was a joy, not just a pleasure to read it. There was so much talent and spirit about it. I'd have said forcefulness, too, if it had been written on a quieter plane now and then, and periodically raised onto a higher one. As it was, there was no such forcefulness, but instead there was a sustained evenness of style. The writing was pure and virile, and yet not lacking in that occasional entertaining touch, that bit of light relief at the appropriate moment. The quality of nobility, of sublimity you have. I want you to keep it, and carry on just the way you're doing. Your subject also contributed to the result, which is the reason why you should always select a fertile one that will engage the mind's attention and stimulate it. But I'll write and say more about the book when I've gone over it again. At the moment, my judgment isn't really a sufficiently settled one. It's as if I'd heard it all rather than read it. You must let me go into it thoroughly, too. You needn't be apprehensive. You'll hear nothing but the truth. How fortunate you are in possessing nothing capable of inducing anyone to tell you a lie over a distance as great as the one that separates us. Except that even in these circumstances, when all reason for it is removed, we still find habit a reason for telling lies. Letter number 47. I'm glad to hear from these people who've been visiting you that you live on friendly terms with your slaves. It is just what one expects of an enlightened, cultivated person like yourself. They're slaves, people say. No, they're human beings. They're slaves. But they share the same roof as ourselves. They're slaves. No, they're friends. Humble friends. They're slaves. Strictly speaking, they're our fellow slaves, if you once reflect that fortune has as much power over us as over them. This is why I laugh at those people who think it degrading for a man to eat with his slave. Why do they think it degrading? Only because the most arrogant of conventions has decreed that the master of the house be surrounded at his dinner by a crowd of slaves who have to stand around while he eats more than he can hold, loading an already distended belly in his monstrous greed until it proves incapable any longer of performing the function of a belly, at which points he expends more effort in vomiting everything up than he did in forcing it down. And all this time the poor slaves are forbidden to move their lips to speak, let alone to eat. The slightest murmur is checked with a stick. Not even accidental sounds like a cough or a sneeze or a hiccup are let off a beating. All night long they go on standing about, dumb and hungry, paying grievously for any interruption. The result is that slaves who cannot talk before his face talk about him behind his back. The slaves of former days, however, whose mouths were not sealed up like this, who were able to make conversation not only in the presence of their master, but actually with him, were ready to bare their necks to the executioner for him, to divert unto themselves any danger that threatened him. They talked at dinner, but under torture they kept their mouths shut. It is just this high-handed treatment which is responsible for the frequently heard saying, "You've as many enemies as you've slaves." They are not our enemies when we acquire them. We make them so. For the moment I pass over other instances of our harsh and inhuman behaviour, the way we abuse them, as if they were beasts of burden instead of human beings. The way, for example, from the time we take our places on the dinner couches, one of them mops up the spittle and another stations at the foot of the couch, collects up the leavings of the drunken diners. Another carves the costly game birds, slicing off choice pieces from the breast and rump with the unerring strokes of a trained hand. Unhappy man, to exist for the one and only purpose of carving a fat bird in the proper style. Although the person who learns the technique from sheer necessity is not quite so much to be pitied as the person who gives demonstrations of it for pleasure's sake. Another, the one who serves the wine, is got up like a girl and engaged in a struggle with his years. He cannot get away from his boyhood, but is dragged back to it all the time. Although he already has the figure of a soldier, he is kept free of hair by having it rubbed away or pulled out by the roots. His sleepless night is divided between his master's drunkenness and sexual pleasures. Boy at the table, man in the bedroom. Another, who has the privilege of rating each guest's character, has to go on standing where he is, poor fellow, and watch to see whose powers of flattery and absence of restraint in appetite or speech are to secure them an invitation for the following day. Add to these the caterers with their highly developed knowledge of their master's palate. The men who know the flavours that will sharpen his appetite, know what will appeal to his eyes, what novelties can tempt his stomach when it is becoming queasy, what dishes he will push aside with the eventual coming of sheer satiety, what he will have a craving for on that particular day. These are the people with whom a master cannot tolerate the thought of taking his dinner, assuming that to sit down at the same table with one of his slaves would seriously impair his dignity. "The very idea," he says. Yet have a look at the number of masters he has from the ranks of these very slaves. Take Callistus, one-time master. I saw him once actually standing waiting at Callistus' door, and refused admission while others were going inside. The very master who had attached a price ticket to the man and put him up for sale along with other rejects from his household staff. There's a slave who has paid his master back, one who was pushed into the first lot too, the batch on which the auctioneer is merely trying out his voice. Now it was the slave's turn to strike his master off the list, to decide that he's not the sort of person he wants in his house. Callistus's master sold him, yes, and look how much it cost him. How about reflecting that the person you call your slave traces his origin back to the same stock as yourself, has the same good sky above him, breathes as you do, lives as you do, dies as you do? It is as easy for you to see in him a free-born man as for him to see a slave in you. Remember the Varus disaster? Many a man of the most distinguished ancestry, who was during his military service as the first step on the road to a seat in the Senate, was brought low by fortune, condemned by her to look after a steading, for example, or a flock of sheep. Now